Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the commissioners and staff, I would like to welcome you to the September 17th, 2024 meeting of the City of Roseville Transportation Commission. Please check your personal devices and make sure that they are all on silent. If you would like to follow along with the agenda, they are available at the end of the staff table here, the green pages. And if you're watching remotely, all documents are available online at the city's website for the Transportation Commission. If you do plan to speak tonight, please be sure to fill out a yellow speaker card located at the podium, and then when you're done speaking, please return it to the staff table. If you do speak this evening, please only address the commission from the podium. Please refrain from addressing any member of the city staff or any member of the public. Please address the commission only. Public participation is always welcome, and your questions and comments are always noted. Lenny, can you please call roll?
Commissioner Panchel?
Here.
Commissioner Festerson?
Here.
Commissioner McGeorge?
Here.
Commissioner Pell?
Here.
Commissioner Probst?
Here.
Commissioner Radford?
Here.
Commissioner Roberts?
Here.
And Chair Groff.
Here. All right. Commissioner Festerson, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I would like to open the meeting up for public comment. Public comment is a time for any member of the public who would like to address the commission on any transportation-related item that is not on the agenda. Speakers shall restrict their comments to issues that are within the subject jurisdiction of the Transportation Commission and limit comments to 3 minutes. The Brown Act does not permit the commission to discuss or take action on issues that are not listed on the agenda. If you do come up to the podium, please state your name for the record. Is there anyone that would like to address anything that's not on an agenda? Please. You have a speaker card and like your name, please.
My name's Jay. I live in Roseville for 14 years. I was looking on your agenda here, and it says, the City of Roseville welcomes your participation. Can you guys open up public comments on the YouTube channel? That would be really nice for people to add that can't make it.
Thank you, Jay. Yes, please come up to the podium. And if you have a speaker card, Jay, did you return your speaker card back to the staff table?
He did.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Nick Bryant. I wanted to come up here because, well, first of all, I have a disability, and, well, I wanted to say that I can't drive a car, and I'm going to need help from bus drivers because I go to Sutter Health, and I can't drive because of my disability. So I'm going to need help from Rich and his team at the bus drive, all the bus drivers to help me out to get around, to get to my doctor's office, to get to where I need to go because I can't drive, and I'm at this point where I'm going to have to ride the buses for the rest of my life with the seniors because I can't drive. And it's at the point where I had lived in Roseville for a long time, and Heritage Park Apartments has gotten bad, and it's just got cars in there in the apartment complex. It's just bad. So I hope that there's something gets worked out, and I hope that you guys can help me out. I hope Rich can help me out with the situation where I'm at. Right, this is where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Is there anybody else that would like to make a public comment for something that's not on the agenda? All right, seeing none. One more?
One on the back
Go ahead and
there.
please come up. Thank you.
My name is Jennifer Higgins, and I have lived in Roseville for about 11 years. And I submitted comments online more extensively, but I just wanted to share with you tonight that I have attended your open houses for the Transportation 360 And I want you to significantly think about the major changes that are going on with the proposed for your bus routing. I live off Pleasant Grove. My mother lives at Eschaton, Roseville Manor. I'm speaking here for her tonight because she's homesick. And I'm sincerely concerned about the major changes that are going to go on, especially with the M route. I think the service changes that you guys are proposing to make are not thinking, and I wrote this on my online comments, are not thinking about the seniors and the disabled. My mother especially expressed this to me and asked me to share it with you. She has not used Dial-A-Ride because it is hard for her to learn an app. If you do not have enough drivers to support the influx of people that are going to be required to use Arrow/Dial-A-Ride, if you take the M route away from the Fitiment to Wood Creek Oaks block, you will see an increased amount of ridership because I live in that block also. That is, you're going to have a severe increase in demand. To require people to take 2 buses to get to the stores on Fairway, it's going to be a hardship on the amount of seniors that live in West Park. I was told that this new routing is done because of the request to go to Sutter. Do you really have that many people going to Sutter that need direct service? I sincerely ask you to think about this before you put this routing into play. And you're also, by doing this new routing, you're taking direct service, fixed route bus service away from Kaiser Riverside and Kaiser Eureka. And you're making that Arrow on demand required only. The Riverside Kaiser intersection is very dangerous. And I've taught my mother to use that to use that bus stop just barely. And now you're asking her to cross the intersection once or twice to get to Riverside Kaiser. That's dangerous. I'm visually impaired, legally blind. I wouldn't want to do it. Forget about having a senior do it to get to Kaiser Riverside. I seriously ask you to take a look at this routing before you put it into permanent play.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Higgins. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Jane Burney, and I live in Eschaton. I'm only representing myself here from what I observe. I actually am close to what I call my best buy date, and my car is also at that point. And I periodically give people rides who need to get to other places. The M bus does serve quite a few people and is very necessary right now, particularly since you are adding a affordable housing complex next door, which intends to have any number of people in it. Again, they may be riding the bus. My bigger concern, though, is finding out for myself as a senior that it's difficult to carry packages, anything bulky, pulling your shopping cart, even to take the bus, even though they lower it down and make it easier. I would ask you to focus on the Arrow scheduling. It is more expensive than the bus for some people. They've expressed that to me. And I actually live with people who, if I were a medical person, would probably determine that they are impaired dementia-wise. They use the bus frequently. They get confused. It's very expensive for them, according to them, for the Arrow, and they wait a long period of time in inclement weather, heat, and they have a difficult time making arrangements. They are not able to handle technology. I fix more phones, more computers, more whatever else. They really don't know what they're doing. So if you would keep in mind the seniors, it would be very much appreciated. But I would like to call out Mr. Richard Frost, who has been so kind and so outgoing and so responsive to any of the calls. And I have filled out the survey and made my concerns known. So please help us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else that would like to make public comment for items that are not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we will close the public comments. And the next item on the agenda is the approval for the July 16, 2024 minutes. Is there any commissioners that would like to make a motion and a second to approve the July minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Commissioner Radford and Commissioner McGeorge. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion is approved. Moving on to presentations. Item 6.1 for the South Placer County Sales Tax Overview. This is an informational item only. No action is required by the commission. And staff, can we have your presentation?
Thank you, Chair Groff, and members of the commission. At last month's meeting, there were a number of questions related to the South Placer tax initiative. And so this evening, we have Matt Click, the Executive Director of Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, to do an overview of this initiative.
Thanks, Ed. And if we could get the deck pulled up. So good evening, everybody. Why don't I just start out, and we've got a lot of transportation professionals here. A lot of you probably know who and what PCTPA is, but maybe a couple of you don't. So why don't we just start with level setting, and then we'll get into some of the details. So if I could please have the next slide. So what we are as PCTPAs, we're the Regional Transportation Planning Agency for the county and the 6 municipalities. We were created under state law in 1975. You're probably familiar with SACOG, which is our federally recognized MPO. But California, being California, said, hey, wait, we want to do that too. So they created these RTPAs in the middle 70s, and we serve that function for Placer County and the municipalities. We do a lot of other things. We're part of CCJPA, the ALUC, Sparta, et cetera. But really, as PCTPA, the one thing we absolutely have to do is prepare a regional transportation plan and a transportation improvement plan, basically a project list and a plan surrounding that. We'll talk a little bit more. But you see that tagline at the bottom. When I go out and I'm talking to the public or talking to business folks at the chamber, this is the way I sort of describe fundamentally what we are. We as an entity, we plan, we're planners, we're funders, we act as the banker lots of times, and we help deliver mobility. And the word help in there is with a lot of intention, because we don't have transit fleets, we don't have a public works department. We work with Ed, we work with Jason in the public works department, who are actually, part of your municipal services delivering that. But that's what and who PCTPA is. Could I get the next slide? And so we're governed by a 9-member board of directors, 1 from each municipality, 2 supervisors, and a citizen. And of course, currently we have Mayor Bruce from Roseville as our vice chair. And in January, he will be the chair of PCTPA for 2025. Next slide. And just a moment, we're 7 strong. There is only 7 full-time employees at PCTPA, and I take a moment to talk about that because I'm proud of that, because we deliver a lot of service for 7 people, and we do that through a public-private partnership model. So what you see in blue there are full-time public employees, and everything you see in green is a contracted service through either a vendor or a contractor or a consultant. So we lean heavily on the consultant community, so as our workflow goes up and down, we can ramp up and down, but run a very lean operation at PCTPA. Next slide. And as I said, the only thing we really have to do as PCTPA is develop and deliver that regional transportation plan. We're currently working on that 2050 plan. Next slide. So one of the things, I could go, if you guys gave me 40 minutes, I'd talk to you about all of our priorities, our roadway priorities, our transit priorities, our bicycle priorities. But having only 10 minutes, I just want to focus on a couple of our key, because these are really our biggest budget items. And these are our regional roadway priorities. And so one is improving State Road 65. And I want to point out that that's a $350 million project. And we currently have $16 million in the bank for that. And that schematic schematic you see is the full ultimate build-out, which would occur in phases. But that schematic is what represents $350 million. Now, part of that project, what we care about, probably all of us in this room the most, and we see as the highest need is southbound at the southern end. We have that project, you might not know this, fully environmentally cleared and 95% designed. The only thing we lack is money. So if we had money, we could go to construction on that likely in 2026. Next slide. And equally, 8065, that is an $800 million project to improve that. And again, environmentally cleared, could start sections of that in 2026 if we had funding for it. Next slide. So I'll take a moment and explain what you're seeing here. You are seeing existing 2023 traffic conditions. And what you're seeing is the evening weekday rush hour, right? We love to get into the details here. And just to remind everybody, green's really great, yellow not so good, red bad, right? So what you're looking at is current traffic conditions in the PM rush hour. Could you advance one slide, please? So if we do the no build, which is a fancy way of saying don't do anything, this is what happens to your congestion in 28. Next slide. This is what it looks like in 38. Next slide. And this is what it looks like in 48. And so you get to a place where 65 is severely congested, Interstate 80 is severely congested, and a couple of things are going to happen. One, regional traffic. You know, there's all sorts of markets of traffic, and regional traffic really wants to be on State Road 65. It doesn't want to be coming down Roseville Parkway and Freeway. It doesn't want to be coming down your arterials. It's finding its way down your arterials because 65 isn't functioning, and it's going to continue to do that, and it's just going to grow and grow and grow until it locks down Roseville and Rockland on that southern end because it can't be where it wants to be, which is on 65 and 80. And if you are living in places east of Roseville and east of this, like let's say Loomis and Auburn, you know, you really need 80 to get home. So even though you don't need 65, you're going to be facing this evening wall of traffic that is about 35 lane miles of congestion. So think 5 lanes wide, 7 miles long. So think 65 back to the split. That's what you're going to be dealing with if we go and do nothing. Next slide. So the reason I talked about the regional transportation plan is to tell you in that official plan, we show $8 billion in needs. That's everybody's needs, what everybody would want. Really, though, we've got about $3 billion that are extremely, extremely critical. And so those are largely unfunded. Next slide. So that gets us to the question of, well, how would we fund these growing needs, right? So we're aware that traffic is back, it's growing, and we also know revenue is down and declining. The LAO, which I think is a very good source, a nonpartisan source, the Legislative Analyst's Office, they would say we're going to lose $6 billion in gas tax revenue over the next 10 years. That's largely because of electric vehicle penetration into the market. So I'm not making any comment about that for air. That's a great thing. Half of all electric vehicles in America are in California. What that means is that the very limited dollars that we get through the state right now are only going to decline because they're going to lose about $600 million more dollars a year. And in fact, by the time you get to 2030, all that SB1 revenue, all that increases that occurred, those will all be vacated and gone. So that brings me to that punchline of if we want to solve for this traffic congestion, we're going to have to deal with this locally, which brings us to how Ed opened it up, is this idea of a sales tax. So we as PCTPA were asked to evaluate that. We hired HGL economists, and they tell us that a half-cent sales tax would generate $1.58 billion over 30 years. So that's according to the economists. Next slide. So why would we want to do such a thing? Well, as we just talked about, state funding is down. Federal funding has not been raised since 1993 or 4. It's 18.4 cents a gallon. So think about that. If you didn't get a raise since 1994, where the purchasing power of that would be. And then the very limited funding that remains at the state level isn't really for highway and road improvements. That's just not the priorities of the state of California right now. That's just the reality. So the very limited monies that they have to do more than fix potholes is going to rail systems, alternative transportation, biking, things like that. And the competitive funding programs that do exist, meaning we have to actually, we as PCTPA, just like Roseville does in certain categories, have to go compete for grants, and we have to identify a local match and say, this is how we will match your state dollars if we're so fortunate to win this competitive grant. So we already have 25 counties in California who have a model for how to do this. They're known as self-help counties, where they tax themselves so they can generate that local funding, have that local match. And they've been doing this since the 1970s. I will note there will be a local measure on the ballot in November, Measure B, and so that's just stating a matter of fact. Next slide. So it's important to see, I said 25 self-help counties. Here's what they look like. This is the list. And there's ones on there that you would absolutely understand. Los Angeles, right? You would see Orange County. But you'd see some on there that you might not, you might be surprised that are on there, like Stanislaus or Napa, right? But the reason I put this up here is we as Placer County, this is our competitors. So when my staff put together grants, and we've got to compete, we're competing to get that Placer County, that Roseville fuel tax money that you're putting in. We're competing with these other regional governments and local governments across the state to bring that back to Roseville and Placer County. And you can see where your money's going. This is just some pull downs from LinkedIn in the last few months. You know, the state awarded the Port of Oakland $119 million. That's competitive money. Some of that's coming from Placer County and Roseville. And I love the one, as far as SCAG, they got $237 million for affordable climate-friendly housing out of transportation funding. That's your money going down south. So unless we have a way to compete, we don't really have a good competitive edge to bring money home. Next slide. So what would we do? Hey, if we get this money, what would we do with it? Well, we've got a few different categories, and I'll go through those quickly. One, major highways and roads, $825 million. 52% of the money would go to major highways and roads. And I talk to some people, and they say it should all go to highways and roads. And I talk to other people, and they say none of it should go to highways and roads. Why would you do that? That's terrible, right? We should be doing other things. And everybody's a little bit right. This is the major highway and road program. Matt, why is it 52%? And I'll tell you why. Because this is the category that there is no soft match from the state, because they're not even competitively funding these types of projects. There's a few categories, but largely we aren't going to see state grant dollars coming in to bolster our local revenues in this project category. So when you might think, well, it's so heavily tilted towards highways and roads, you're only looking at the hard money of $1.58 billion. We're going to be able to attract back a lot of soft match money, largely in the areas of transit and alternative transportation, because that's what the state prioritizes. So this is why you see so much weighting of dollars towards these. 65 and the 80-65 interchange are on there, as I showed you, as well as a series of interchanges, and I'll note Baseline Road as well, to help work with Roseville and others to get that project done. Next slide. So local transportation program, I should point out that 1 in 4 of all of the dollars will go back to the 3 cities of Roseville, Rockland, and Lincoln. And just to point out, this taxing district is just for those 3 municipalities. So, you know, what that means is every year, $10, $11, $12 million will be coming, you know, back to the 3 municipalities. So do the math. You're about half of that population. You're going to see $4.5 to $5 million come back to the city. That's going to be a direct pass-through from PCTPA to the city of Roseville. Jason and Ed and the team, they can use that and flex that for transit. They can flex that for bicycle paths. They can, you know, flex that for pothole repair. The only thing they have to ensure, and that we'll work with them to make sure, is that it's a transportation purpose. Beyond that, you know, PCTPA isn't looking to be a regulatory body, so if there's a transportation need, you'll have access to those monies. Rail and transit gets 12% at 187, bike and ped 5, and then there's this last category of competitive. Why competitive? What's that mean? Well, this is a 30-year measure. And so we've already seen what technology's done to transportation in the last 12, 13 years. It's just going to continue. And so we do want to operationalize the system and leverage technology. So we want to have a small bucket of funding to say, hey, if you've got a smart signal, if you've got some sort of ITS improvement, come forward and let's compete. and see what, innovation can bring to the transportation space. So that's a little bit of, that's what we mean by competitive. Next slide. All right, so that's my deck, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. At this point, we'll open it up for public comment, and then we'll have questions for you, sir. At this time, I'd like to open up for public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the commission on this item?
Comments.
All right, sir. As you approach the podium, you have 5 minutes to address the commission. You are to address the commission only, and not a member of the city staff or the public. If you ask questions, you may be referred to contact the Alternative Transportation Department outside of this meeting, and the commission reserves the right to discuss the matter with or without city staff.
You got it all in, okay. Yeah, I support all the road projects. They have to be done. They have to be done. And I will vote for it. But there's some issues that could have been worked out along the way, and they weren't, and it's going to create some problems down the way. They mostly involve transit. Transit is kind of sprinkled through the thing, and as an operator or a city, you don't know where to go, where the money is. And if you go back to that thing, it says disabled and handicapped. There is no senior and disabled. There is no such program as senior and disabled transportation. It doesn't exist. You just have transit. And then also they talk about commuter and express. There is no such thing as an express program and commuter. It's all transit. And it should be lumped together so a city and an operator can choose, have the money and choose how to spend it. And it's going to, you're going to want to do a transit project and you really don't know where to go. And it's really too bad. And BRT, mark my words, there will not be a BRT project within 30 years in Placer County. It just ain't going to happen. All you have to do is look at the operating costs for that and the fact that it has to be on its own right-of-way to even be called BRT these days. So you're going to have problems figuring out what money, and you don't want to go, for example, say you want to get transit priority or something. Well, that could be part of BRT because that's, helping that. But they may want you to do it in local funding. Well, you don't want to do it in local funding. You want to do it here. Or the elderly and handicapped and comma transit. That's the way it is in the thing. It says comma transit. And so there's just a whole bunch of ways that you can spend it, and somebody is going to tell you how they want you to spend it. You're not going to have much flexibility. And somewhere along the line, this is going to have to be worked out. It could have been worked out previously, but it hasn't been as confusing. And one other thing, Placer County Transit can't use the funds. They're up in Auburn. Well, if they do a garage up there, a maintenance garage, it's not going to be available. You probably won't be able to use the match. And even buses, when Placer County Transit is buying buses, are they going to be able to use the funds from the sales tax to help fund the buses? It's just unsure. So as I say, these things could have been worked out, and they're going to create problems down the way, but I reluctantly support the measure.
Thank you, sir.
My name's Jay.
Jay? Yeah.
I totally agree that the infrastructure definitely needs to be improved and better. And I know that they're looking at other forms of transportation. The bike trails, they're beautiful here, but they don't lead anywhere. They don't really go to specific spots. The e-bikes are like a new technology that's coming out, and they're wonderful. They're awesome. And I don't know why Roseville, with Roseville's weather and it's flat, why we don't have more people biking. Other cities have huge amount of people biking. That would take some cars off of the roads. Not saying it's going to fix everything, but it's a lot less to do biking infrastructure than some of these big projects. Not saying we don't need them, just.
Thank you, sir. All right. Anybody in the room that would like to make any additional public comments for this agenda item? All right, seeing none, I'll close the public comments and open it up for commissioners. We'll start at this end. Commissioner Panchel, do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. Mr. Radford?
I do, Commissioner Groff. First, I'd like to thank Matt Click and his team. Although you are small in number, you guys are strong in what you do, and I appreciate that. And it was a very comprehensive, yet put down into layman's terms. I would like to have had the 40-minute. You had me intrigued because, like everyone shared today, I've lived here for a while too, actually 46 years. I'm a fifth-generation Roseville native, and I'm proud of that. And I believe we need this measure, Measure B, because I choose to live here and raise my family because of the quality of life. And like you showed, in order to keep that quality of life, we have to do something, and we have to take measures into our own hands. And I do want that matching funding. I hate watching my tax dollars go to the Bay Area and Sacramento and other places. We've done a really good job resourcefully. And I believe Jay shared about the trails. I was fortunate enough to serve on the Parks Commission, where the trails, I got to work with the trails as well, and Jason and used to come and give presentations there. Actually, I think it was another Public Works director. I'm aging myself now, but it's part of my goal is to have those trails, the connectivity. You bring up a great point. We are so happy to be working on one right now, Miners Ravine, and we're working in tandem with the county to have that connectivity. Because I can tell you, I'd love to get on that trail and have a weekend where I go see my neighbors and I don't fire up the vehicle. But the reality of it is I have one kid that plays travel baseball over at West Park, and I need to get him there. And then I have a daughter who's over at William Jessup, and I want to be that parent. I want to be there to get them to and from, but it takes me too long to get through town. It's extra stress. But I think a more important thing is I shared that I still live here because I love the quality of life. My parents, as they're getting older, they need to have quick response times. And I've been in 65 where I've seen ambulances behind me, and they can't go anywhere. So I appreciate you saying this. I know you can't be biased either which way or the other, but this is very important, and I'm glad to see that we have a good comprehensive plan on the ballot moving forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Pell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Click. I do have a couple questions. Really appreciate the presentation. Maybe I'll just list them out then. So the first one's, you listed some self-help counties, and I was wondering, are we going to become a self-help county, or are we going to become a self-help South Placer Regional Transportation Agency?
It's the latter. So what happened is in 2018, we passed Bill AB 1413, which allowed us to have a carve-out smaller than a county, and that included us and another area or two other areas in California. So the way that law is written, it has to be two or more adjoining municipalities, and then the county is either fully in or fully out. So based on that, it was decided that the district would be Roseville, Rockland, and Lincoln. And now, just from a economics perspective and a demographics perspective, right, that makes a lot of sense because this is a big place. Placer's big. We got 420,000 people. 300,000 of them are right here. And so, you move into Loomis, Auburn, up the hill, over to the east. We sort of have three counties. We have the Southwest, we have the sort of the middle, and then we have the east. So it was decided that it would be focused where the vast majority of the people and the congestion are, which is here in the Southwest.
Thank you. I guess, is there any estimate as the size of the pot of money that's potentially being opened up with matching funds, or is that hard to say with the competitive nature of the grant process these days?
You're right on it. It's two things. It's a few things. It's year to year. Right? What is available year to year in that competitive? And then it's also, what is your project mix? Because some years there's X amount of money just earmarked for transit. There's some that's just earmarked for active transportation. Some earmarked just for, freight and other things. So it depends on the year, what we're trying to do, and then what we can go for. But at any given time, I think last year there were over $800 million, in competitive grants across the state of California. And that's a pot of money, you know. Would we have gone for a quarter of that, half of that? It would depend year to year to year.
It's a pot of money that we don't have access to right now.
Well, we can apply, right? But again, I've got 7 people, which includes me. And, you know, and I'll be honest, you know, last year when I onboarded from the private sector, we took the 35, 36 different grants, we put them on a spreadsheet, we had a war room, and we said, all right, let's look at this like a private sector business. What are we going to go and no go? And we went through a workshop session, and we took 28, 30 off the board. We investigated 5 or 6. We took another 3 off, and we said we're going to target these 3 because we've got projects and we can do it. And we won all 3. And we brought in $2.2 million this year in grant funding. And we're proud of that. We're part of a 100% win rate. That's a great hit rate. It's only going to go down. But we want those to go from single millions to 10 millions to, right? So that's where we'll need the big matching dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Let's see, Commissioner Roberts?
First, I want to address Jay in the back. I wanted to let you know, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but the city of Roseville is actually doing an analysis to look at things like bike connectivity currently. So I just wanted to let you know that the city has that on their radar, and they're looking at things like that for citizens like you, because you're correct that there are bike paths that don't connect around the city, and I think the city is very excited to try and figure out how to fix that in the future. And then secondly, Matt, thank you very much for coming and doing this presentation today. I was one of the people that had told Ed that it'd be really interesting to have somebody like you come, because I know that this is really big for this, not only the city of Roseville, but Rockland and Lincoln and this region. And I think that it's really important that the people get to just hear more about this, because I think we can all agree that it's certainly a very large issue here in this area is traffic, mostly on the freeways, and also locally. I live and I work in Roseville. I don't get on the freeway to go to work, but I can tell you there's a lot of traffic driving from West Roseville to East Roseville every day, whether you're on the surface streets or the freeways. So thank you very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it today.
Ropes?
Mike, I believe it's the CTC that allocates a lot of those grants.
ETC does.
Yeah, I can just tell, and I'm not speaking in official capacity for any of those public entities, even though I technically work for one, but I can tell you that with the current budget climate, working for Caltrans right now is the last thing the state is going to do is going to build more freeways. I work in the Division of Maintenance, and I can tell you that if any of you were intimately familiar with the amount of money we spend on litter, homeless encampments, and graffiti, all of you would probably vote radically differently than you do for the public policies that cause those to be endemic problems. 2, and they look at self-help counties as people that are taking the ball into their own hands. It is what it is. It's the political reality of the situation. But I think I can use the best analogy, being someone that's fond of analogies, is you ever see that teenager working and they're maybe mowing lawns and they're really happy, and then you find out that their parents offered to match their hourly wage. That's basically how they look at self-help counties, you know, because you're doing it and you're standing up for yourself and you're meeting your own transit needs, because we're not going to build any more roads in this state for a long time. And that's the reality of it. So we need to be proactive. Nobody likes taxes, except maybe the politicians that get to spend them. But in my experience, a local tax is always a better and more efficient tax. And I have always had a lot of admiration for PCTP. I covered it as a reporter when Celia McAdam was running the show, and I really appreciate that you guys keep your overhead staff small. I think that really is a baseline commitment. So I just think that we have to be proactive and take this into our own hands, because forget the 2038 map, the 2028 map scares me, because I don't know if there's any available metrics, but for how much money or business we lose or whatever once we become, Bay Area Junior, and I don't want to see that. So I would like to see us be proactive and do something local.
Thank you for your presentation. It was great. We've been working on this for years and years and years. And I just hope that we can get something passed so we can start to see some improvement on 65. Mike Lucan came here so many times, educating us and sharing great information. And so we have had the privilege being aware of this. And I thank you so much for coming back today. And I just hope that we see some movement on your project, on this.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor George?
Thank you very much for the presentation, like everyone said. I've also been in Roseville. I mean, I think Doyle's family and my family basically started this town back forever ago. But that being said, I've seen 65 go from 2 lanes all the way to Lincoln, and, it grew a little bit, but we've grown a lot more.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed seeing all of this because I've been kind of wondering where everything was going to go. And I know that we are still growing and that road is not. So I think this is really important for us. And yeah, I'm hopefully excited for things to come. And yeah, that's about all I got, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. I just want to highlight a few things that you brought to our attention, some of the striking things for me as well. You mentioned that there's over $8 billion in project needs, and that's just in Placer County, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And so there's $3 billion identified as critical and unfunded. I take it that is referring to projects that are needed to be done now, if the funding was there? Okay. And so the half-cent sale tax is going to generate about $1.6 billion over 30 years, but there's $3 billion that is needed right now.
Right.
Okay. And then you mentioned let's say the electric vehicle as being well, in my words, a disruptive technology, essentially. And we're looking at $600 million a year in deficit or reduction in revenue, and that's obviously only going to go up. And I would assume go up over the life of if the measure is voted in over that 30 years. And so clearly we're looking at a process issue, a system issue, and where we're completely behind the 8 ball as far as not either foreseeing these issues coming or not voting in a way that we need to vote so that we maintain fiscal responsibility to have monies that are directed towards the roadways and improvements and projects and everything else actually go to those things. A couple of great slides there or pieces of information about housing being taken from gas tax and some other issues as well. So I think there's some misdirection going on at the state level that if we could possibly have some influence on what's going on in Sacramento, that there would be a much better way to gauge how the funds are being directed and how you and your staff could allocate those funds as well and get these projects done. But I did want to ask you, there is a proposal or a program going on right now called Road Charge.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And can you give us an idea on what your understanding of that program is?
Yeah.
Just an overall summary of it.
Sure. So the state of California is investigating something called road usage charging. So in California and Washington and Oregon on the West Coast, you call it RUC. If you're in New York, they call it mileage-based user fee. There's an alliance in DC called MBUFA, the Mileage-Based User Fee Alliance. And so the issue that we have here in California is not just a California issue, right? This issue is all across the U.S. I think it's even worse here in California. And again, this isn't because not anti-EV, but because of the EV penetration and because it's so high, we're seeing those gas taxes erode even at a quicker rate. And also just a little bit of history. I mean, California and Caltrans, we built a lot of state highways that predate the interstate, right? Eisenhower doesn't sign the Federal Highway Defense Act till 1956. So a lot of what California was already developing. And I tell you that to say there's a very large state-owned system that's got to be maintained. If you go to Florida or you go to Texas, a lot of those are federal interstates because they built out after the Second World War. But here in California, we have a very large state-owned system, a large population, and declining revenues. So we're sort of we're sort of on the bleeding edge of this in the state. So what RUC is, road usage charge, is this idea that the state would somehow charge you for every mile you drive. So you would, the issues, there's a lot of issues with this. One is technology. How are they going to do that? Oregon test piloted a system with 500 folks, mostly legislators and Oregon DOT folks who would volunteer to do it, where they put something in your the port in your car, and then it would offload data at the gas tank. So one, there's a big technology issue, how you would do this and enforce it. Two, there's of course what you're all thinking is the privacy issue, which we all tend to still worry about. We sign those Apple terms without even reading it, but we're worried about that privacy issue. So that's a big one. But that's what road usage charges is this idea that people would charge you. So it's in an idea concept. It's not even, there's been a couple of pilots in California so far. I would tell you, this is a personal opinion. This is an opinion of Matt, as a guy who's been in transportation systems planning for 30 years, not as an employee of PCTPA. But my personal opinion would be, I don't think California can do this alone. At some point in time, the federal government is going to have to look at how it replaces 18.4 cents. The Federal Highway Transportation Trust Fund has been borrowing from the general fund in Washington, D.C. for about 12 or 13 years now. It's bankrupt, right? It's not self-sustaining. So that's what it is. That's what the state's looking at. I wouldn't bet on this happening anytime in the next 10, 12, 15 years. And I really don't see how the state of California can go it alone. And the reason I say that is freight distribution. Truckers go across state lines, right? They can't have a system in California that is different than Oregon and Washington State. And if you know anything about trucking, you know that actually over 95% of all trucking companies are 10 or fewer trucks. They're mom and pops. They're not Walmart, Yellow, UPS. They're all these tiny little organizations. And so until the feds get on board and help the freight industry figure out how they would move from a diesel tax and a motor fuel tax to something else, I don't see it progressing. That's my personal opinion. But that's what RUC is.
Okay. I appreciate it. There was some information in there that I wasn't aware of as well. So that's all I have for you, sir. I just want to make a couple more comments about some of the numbers that we're looking at as well. I just looked up some data from CDTFA, I believe it is, California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. Yes, thanks. And 2017, our gas tax per gallon was approximately 27.8 cents per gallon. Now it's 60. So. And now we're looking at this huge deficit and money going different places, and we're not able to fund the projects that we have that are at a critical juncture right now. So November's coming up. We'll see what happens. So anyway, yes, obviously these things need to be done. We all live in Placer County, Roseville specifically. Sometimes it's not a good season to ask for a tax increase, but if you've been out on Highway 65 or 80 or whatever it is, you can see that something's obviously got to be done. So appreciate your presentation. All right, Commissioners, is there any other comments or questions we have for staff? All right, seeing none, we'll close this agenda item. And the next agenda item, 6.2, Annual Unmet Transit Needs Assessment. Again, this is an informational only. No action is needed by the commission. And staff, can we have your presentation?
Thank you, Mr.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You can introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. My name is Mike Costa. I'm a principal transportation planner with the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, working with Matt and my colleague Corey here. And tonight I'm going to give a presentation on a process that we do each year called the Annual Unmet Transit Needs Assessment. And the Annual Unmet Transit Needs Assessment, next slide please, is a process that we have to do as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency because we administer what's called Transportation Development Act Act, or TDA funding. TDA funding is generated from two sources, one being a statewide diesel fuel tax, which goes into what's called state transit assistance funds administered under TDA. And then the other is a quarter-cent general sales tax that circulates back to our region based on its population that goes into a funding pot called local transportation funds. Next slide, please. So for state transit assistance funds, or STA, we, our transit operators, have to use those funds for transit purposes only, such as transit capital, like buying buses or purchasing equipment, and also transit operations. However, local transportation funds, or LTF, can be used not just for transit, but it can be used for other purposes, like repairing streets and roads. Before we're able to siphon those funds off to repair streets and roads, we have to conduct this annual process called the Unmet Transit Needs Assessment process. And through that process, we have to find or make a determination that there are no unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet. That's something that our agency at PCTPA has to make that determination each year as part of this process. Next slide, please. So what is unmet transit need and what is reasonable to meet? These definitions that you see before you are actually established by the PCTPA Board of Directors, and it fits two criteria areas that we have to examine when we receive public comments. The unmet transit needs criteria is very straightforward. Is it something, a need that has to be fulfilled that's not being fulfilled right now by existing public transit services? And then also, is it something that's required under the Americans with Disabilities Act or ADA regulations? That's the unmet need component. If we determine that, then we go into the second phase of the evaluation criteria, which looks at those different criteria of reasonableness to meet, or is there a need that is then feasible or viable to pursue using funding for to implement those services. So we look at different criteria like, are these services something we look at in our regional transportation plan that Matt mentioned earlier? Are these also services that are very broadly supported by the community and not just kind of one-off comments or one-off requests in different parts of the region? Next slide, please. So just to give you an example or kind of an overview of what are some historic unmet transit needs that we've looked at, the latest one being a cross-jurisdictional demand response service across our region for Americans with Disabilities Act users. So anyone that's currently ADA certified, at least on the Placer County Transit side, can go across our jurisdictional boundaries with that ADA service or that on-demand service without having to change buses. That service is also available for general public riders, but those riders do have to transfer to different buses at the city boundaries right now. So that's an unmet transit need that was fulfilled back in 2019. And you can kind of see some of the history as well as of other unmet transit needs that were determined to be reasonable to meet in the past. Next slide, please. So this process, as I mentioned, is an annual process. We typically begin the outreach for this effort in the fall. Right now, we do have a survey that is live. If you go to our website, pctpa.net/unmet-transit-needs, we have a survey that's available in both English and Spanish, as well as Tagalog upon request. And that survey is live actually until October 31st. And after October 31st, our staff at PCTPA, in partnership and coordination with our transit operators, we examine all the comments that we receive from this survey, and we evaluate those comments based on that criteria that I mentioned earlier. And from there, we take it then to our board to determine if there are any unmet transit needs that are then reasonable to meet, which we must fulfill prior to then distributing those TDA funds for the following fiscal year. So I'd also like to point out that in this process, we anticipate going to our board in February. But again, I would encourage, next slide please, anyone who has comments about transit needs, even if they are not determined to be unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet, they're still important for us to hear those comments because those comments allow us to then work with our transit operators like our partners at Roseville, our partners at Placer County Transit and Auburn Transit, to then improve services from an operational standpoint versus just deal with this process from an administrative level. So any comments that we receive are still forwarded to our operators and are still evaluated by our operators. And there may be some system changes that occur because of that are, again, outside of this process. So all that to say is, please, if you do have any unmet transit needs that you think are unmet transit needs, submit those our way and we'll take a look at them. And again, we work with our operators to evaluate them. Next slide, please. One of the things I'd also like to put just a very quick plug, just to shift gears a little bit here, is we are working on a regional active transportation county-wide plan right now. And that is something being led by my colleague Corey over here to my right. And that's the first ever county-wide active transportation plan that we are doing in coordination and partnership with our local jurisdictions. I know here in the city of Roseville, Alternative Transportation is looking at an active transportation plan for the city of Roseville. We are coordinating our efforts with that effort. And we're working with our other partners to, again, look at what can be a future regional active transportation network that could then be competitive to acquire some of those funds that Matt mentioned earlier that we seek after every year with our partners. So we did conduct a first round of outreach for our countywide ATP back in May and June of this year, and we are having some ongoing analysis and evaluation and coordination with our partners to pull in all of the data that we need to assess the current existing conditions of our network. And then we will probably come back to the Roseville Transportation Commission early next year to present those findings and again then look at project coordination with the city of Roseville and our plan for the county to see how those plans interact and connect and integrate with each other. For more information about that effort, my colleague, again, Corey Peterson, is happy to answer those questions, but I just had to throw in a little plug for that project. With that, that concludes my presentation. Next slide, please. I'm available for any questions, and of course, feel free for members of the public to contact me if they have any questions. Thank you so much.
Mr. Schofield, did you have a presentation with this as well? No? Okay. All right, so at this time, we'll just open it up for public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that has any comments on this agenda item? Yes, sir. So you have 5 minutes. Please address the commission only. If you have any questions, you might be referred to the transportation department outside of the meeting. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. I did put a speaker card in and should be over at the recording secretary, so thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Michael Barnbaum. I do a lot of public transportation advocacy and consulting. I've been involved on the unmet transit needs process for Placer County and region-wide for the 6-county region for some time now that I've been living in the region. I've lived in the region since 1995. Three things that stand out to me in looking at an overall picture in Placer County, and some have evolved over the last 5 to 10 years and were not necessarily existing 15, 20, 30 years ago. One that, though, is consistent and is always on the record is Placer County transportation operators need to offer service to their riders, and a way to attract new riders by offering services 7 days a week on fixed route services, not solely 5 or 6 days a week. People have to get around to work, to whatever it is, 7 days a week. And I know I could just speak from existing experience. My 5-day work week is Thursday through Monday. Now, I happen to live in a location and work in a location where I can use transit on my 5-day work week, and my alternative weekend is Tuesday and Wednesday, as my work schedule stands right now. I work with a group of 5 or 6 people in our title that I have at my professional job, and I support about 20 to 30 other people in a step below my title. But with the people that are within my title, I was the very last one in seniority to get a choice of work shift, and I was just got what I got, and it's an alternative work schedule instead of a schedule of the traditional 5 days a week. And I'm pleased in a way that having a weekend that's Tuesday and Wednesday allows me to get to and from jurisdictions in Placer County, and the services are open during my alternative weekend. But services are not open to many folks that work a traditional week and take the traditional weekend off. 1 day at least a week is not available. The other two unmet transit needs, though, that stand out, and these are the ones that have been more evolving over the last decade or so. Late night and expanding the span of service. The Golden One Center is now a prominent location for events in downtown Sacramento. And, you know, when you talk about, well, should Placer County Transit, Roseville Transit, or Capitol Corridor provide that service? Well, you would think first Capitol Corridor, because it's kind of more of an express service. But the problem is, see, they're constrained by what they could operate thanks to Union Pacific Railroad. Transit systems running buses or commuter expresses, not so much, and can more freely do that and are not constrained by a host railroad getting involved as to what they can and cannot operate in frequency or span of service hours. And then a related one is the venue. So this is at the Thunder Valley Casino. And it's a big concert hall. I've seen a lot of things about this on television. And it's just not a venue now where you can get back at night when an event has concluded using any services in that area. So that's another one to kind of monitor and keep track of, and how many more events are going to happen year-round at the venue at Thunder Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, is there anybody else that would like to provide public comment for this agenda item? Mr. Eklund?
Yeah, I just have couple simple comments. One having to do with Sunday service. People don't realize it, but Roseville does have Sunday dial-a-ride. And I think as a pilot project, it would be useful to have a route that goes from like the Galleria to the light rail and stop at several places along there that could be fed by the dial-ride could feed into that. Do it for a year or something and see how it works out. That might be something that, and then also people could drive to you could set up some small park and ride lots where they could tie into that bus, because the real problem with going to Sacramento is parking, costs of parking. So if you're going down for the day, going to a museum or doing something else, I think that would be a useful pilot project to do on that. The other, the thing that holds back the unmet needs assessment thing is basically there's an assumption that if you have either fixed transit or dial-a-ride, they're equivalent. Only if we have one or the other, it meets the need. The two services are very different, and by and large, people who need transit use both services if they have them, and not all services. Both services can be available throughout, but it's very useful to have both services because one is a lot cheaper. Dial-a-ride is at least twice as expensive, and Roseville even more so than that. And fixed route, you can go anytime you want. You don't have to schedule it. And if you're going to a grocery store or something like that, you're going to go 3 or 4 times a week, and so you can get a monthly pass, which you can't do with dial-a-ride. So they're not equivalent, and people need to understand that. And I have nothing wrong with the criteria, but that people need to understand that they aren't equivalent, and you're never going to have a system in this city or in the 3 big cities that's just dial-a-ride. Right now, it's $41 a ride subsidy for dial-a-ride, where it's like $12 for fixed route. You've got to have them both, So That's why nothing ever comes out. Between the short-range transit plans, nothing ever happens. And so what really has to happen in the intermediate years is operators do some specialized studies, where they have issues and they make changes and things and do that. We can't just wait every 3 to 5 years to dig into a study with an outside consultant who really needs to be re-educated every time. Yes.
All right. Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to provide a public comment for this agenda item? Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to add to all the comments that have already been said, but in regards to Sunday service, if Roseville Transit was to consider Sunday service along with Placer County Transit, I think it would be a great addition, because if I can speak for my own needs, I'm legally blind, and as you can see, I have a disabled daughter. But I've lived in the area for 11 years, but I grew up in New England. And long story short, my husband is a school bus driver. He is a California resident for all his life. He's a Placer County resident for all his life. And we've had many dinner table discussions about the fact that light rail does not extend all the way up to Auburn. He has said himself that if transit other than dial-a-ride existed on Sunday, he would leave the car at home. And we would take the bus to the mall, or we would go somewhere. Ironically, he hates driving. He does it. He's a special needs school bus driver for a living. He loves his job, don't get me wrong. But he would love to be able to go somewhere on a weekend and leave the car at home. If you're going to advertise Roseville nationwide as a tourist city, as a place for people to come visit, I have a bachelor's degree in travel and tourism. I don't work in the industry because I've had disability discrimination 20 years ago when I graduated from college. If you're going to advertise this city as a place for people to come, I suggest you strongly look at increasing your transit, not because it's going to put more buses on the road, but because people will use it so they won't have to rent an expensive car, but because that's what cities like Boston and other places have to get around. And they use it as an alternative to renting a car. If you advertise your city as a tourist city, if we had a bus that went from Roseville to Tahoe, we would get on the bus and go. We'd leave the car at home. Yeah, go down to Monterey, go down to the beach. We'd leave the car at home. But you don't think like that because, as my totally blind friend who came 3 weeks ago said, California is car-centric. If you get away from that, you won't have to put 6 lanes on the highway. Think about it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to provide a public comment for this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public comments for this agenda item, and we'll go to the commissioners for comments and questions. Start at this end.
Excuse me, I don't have a comment. Thank you.
No comment, thank you.
No comment, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, but no comments at this time.
Mr. Bell?
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. I read through the last unmet transit needs survey, and I read through like 40 pages, like 200 comments of just like, hey, we'd really like to go somewhere on transit. And it seems to me we have an incredibly high bar for the unmet transit needs, and it does produce something. Like we have met those needs, which is fantastic, But I just wonder, is the unmet transit needs process doing what we want it to do?
That's a great question. And
It's more rhetorical than anything else.
I will say too that, our process, as I kind of highlighted in the presentation, we have some obligations pursuant to our Transportation Development Act administration responsibilities to fulfill with our criteria. But I will say that even comments from an operational standpoint have led to operational evaluation and improvements beyond based on comments that we hear. So even if, again, it's not an unmet need that's determined to be reasonable to meet, we still take those seriously, and we work with our operators to see how can we address them in different ways, such as even part of the comprehensive operational analysis work that we're doing and Roseville's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great for, the public to know, like, hey, just because maybe your need was not classified as an unmet transit need, it is like someone's looking at it, someone's paying attention. So I think that's probably very good for people to hear. Thanks, Mike.
Mr. Redford?
Okay, I'm up. Okay, well, Mike, good report. Can you once again let us know what that survey, it's due by October 1st, and I heard, I think, Jay, Nick Bryant, Mr. Eklund always has good comments, and I think Ms. Higgins, who spoke last. I encourage you guys all to fill out that survey. Maybe we could put it up here one more time, so if you haven't done so, you'll have the opportunity to do so before October 1st, and that's what I'm hearing from Mike and Corey. And I want to thank you guys for your presentation tonight.
Thank you.
First, I want to say thank you for this presentation. I think it's wonderful that our city and the county as well is working towards meeting the needs, and I think this is a beautiful way for people to give their inputs on how city and county can work together to improve the transit needs.
No questions. Very good presentation. Yeah, I think it's a good idea if maybe we could put that website up again on the the slides, or as he's getting that. I took the survey as well, and it takes 3 minutes, 4 minutes, something like that. And there's additional locations to put some comments in. So it's yeah, I know you guys take those things seriously, and you read them, and anybody who does give their input is obviously taking enough time to give their input, and you guys do take those as credible sources, I think. So let me just.
The website is just, if you go to pctpa.net/unmet-transit-needs, that's where you can find the survey form, both in English and Spanish. You're also welcome to send comments to my email directly, which is mcosta@pctpa.net.
Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you.
And commissioners, any more comments or questions for staff? All right, so we'll close that item. The next and final item is 6.3 Roseville Transit Comprehensive Operational Analysis Update. Again, this is an informational item only. No action is required on the commission. And staff, can we have your presentation?
Good evening, Commissioners. Next, I'd like to introduce Raul Kumar, who is the president of Innovate Mobility. He will be reviewing and discussing all the updates to our COA, or our Comprehensive Operational Analysis process.
Speaking of consultants who need a re-education, I'm going to hopefully get through this today as quickly as possible. Can we get the slide presentation up? So it's a real pleasure to be here this evening, as I've been here a few times. I want to thank all the commissioners who came to our last open house in August. It was great, and this is about a year in the making. So what you're going to hear today is a culmination of all the work that we've done to date, all the public comments that we've heard, and in fact, we're probably going to be able to address many, if not all, of the comments that you've heard tonight about some of the changes that are coming. Next slide, please. So I think everyone has heard tonight, and I really am, it was really nice to hear from PCTPA and Mike specifically and Matt about some of the changing landscape of Placer County. That has been the case in Roseville as well. A growing population, a growing number of needs for housing and transit and things like that. And that really led the city to release an RFP for this Transportation 360 project that I've been lucky to be a part of for the last year. And the goal really is to figure out how people move in and around the city and then create transportation modes that address those needs. Next slide, please. So how do we meet those needs? Well, we want to provide flexible, fast transit that is adaptable and accessible. I don't believe, and I think I've said this before, in this old adage of coverage versus frequency, this zero-sum game that says you have to provide service everywhere or you have to do it really quickly. What we'd like to do is look at the experience and the access, the experience of the riders that use the system, and how accessible is it? And that's little a accessible in the sense that where can we reach and where can we get folks to come either into Roseville or travel through Roseville quicker? And I've gone through all the data sets and things like that before, so I won't belabor you with that. But what we've come up with is what we call a preferred service plan. And that is a preferred service plan from our standpoint, not something that the city's presenting. Next month, we'll be presenting to you for approval. Sorry, one, if you go back. Next month, we'll be presenting the plan that we recommend the city, the commission approve to the council. So these 4 service plans come into play because we want to look at all the different scenarios that we can offer. So the preferred option is a service plan that, again, meets those needs, addresses the transportation deficiencies as best we can within the confines of the budget with a slight increase. The unconstrained plan is, okay, if we were king for a day and we had unlimited funds, how would we design a system that, again, was relevant to Roseville? It's not a question of let's deploy light rail everywhere or bus rapid transit or increase fixed route frequency to every 5 minutes. The constrained plan, before I talk about that, Roseville Transit contracts out its services, and that contract is coming up for renewal next year. That will have significant impacts to the operating costs of the city. And so the constrained plan takes those into account, but tries to keep the same level of hours that are currently being operated. And finally, then there's a no increase plan, which essentially says that the city cannot withstand that increase and must reduce service in order to meet those increased needs. Today, we're just going to talk about the preferred option, receive your feedback, continue to receive feedback from the public, and then come back to you with a recommended option next month. Next slide, please. Just to cover those plans in numbers, you'll notice that the FY 2026 projected, that is with no change. So that is if Roseville Transit continued to operate as it does today, operates about 46,000 hours, about 620,000 miles per year, and including that contract increase is about $7.1 million. Service span is from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., Monday through Sunday, albeit Sunday is just Aero and Saturday is a limited fixed route with Aero. Our preferred service plan that we're going to show you tonight increases the number of hours by about 8%, the number of miles by more than that. And so, doing the math, you'll notice more miles, more hours, it actually means a faster system. So we are estimating a system speed, we talked about last month, that is going to be faster so people can reach their destinations quicker. It does come at a cost. It is about a 10% increase over the existing projected FY 2026 costs. We are already working with the city to see what is palatable, what is digestible. It does come with a 3-year implementation plan, so you don't see those costs on day one. You'll see them over the life of the next 3 years. So perhaps the local sales tax measure comes in, perhaps some grant funding comes in. That plan is affordable and doable, and I'll show you that the difference between that plan and a slightly cheaper plan is not that significant. So this is absolutely an attainable service option. And it does include a service span that is 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. Next slide, please. So a summary of that preferred service plan. One is faster, more frequent service. Every single route except for one will operate every 30 minutes. That is roughly double the frequency as you have today. We will separate the Aero service into zones, and we'll talk about, the lady who talked about the delays with Arrow, we'll talk about how we address those with those separated zones. And then more direct service into downtown Sacramento, including some of the new developments there, like at the Richards office building, office complex. We're also proposing better connections, so expanding where Arrow goes, where fixed route goes, expanding service to Sacramento, and better connections to Roseville residents with SAC-RT, as well as service to Granite Bay in partnership with Placer County Transit. And then finally, you'll notice on the big map, there's less overlap. There's also less routes that kind of operate in a circuitous fashion, more direct service, more service. If you're on one side of the street, you're going in one direction. You're on the other side, you're going in the other direction. So it makes it much, much easier to use, lowers the barrier of entry, and it also takes away these things called one-way loops. So you actually almost have to go out of your direction to ultimately reach your direction. And then the last thing is we're talking about a change to service to Sierra College. This would be now handled by Placer County Transit, no longer by the city of Roseville. We had a meeting with them today, coordinating schedules, making sure that something like that can happen. Next slide, where we'll go through the plan. And please stop me. I know it's getting late. I want to make sure we get through some of these things. And this is a lot of information. So when we talk about route numbers, this is just a sample route number. Ultimately, the city, the marketing team are going to name and number the routes, whatever they like. But we're calling this Route 1. Before I go into this, I want to say that a lot of these routes were presented to the public. All these routes were presented to the public in August. We published them on a website and received, so far, 42 public comments on the individual public comments. Many people left multiple comments on these changes. Every single one except for, I think, 4 have been implemented in these changes. A lot of them had to do with this route here. There was a lot of concern, and Ms. Higgins brought this up, about service along Pleasant Grove being taken away. We've actually rerouted Route 1 to come from the existing start of the Route M, going to Sutter Health by way of the Galleria. This is actually going to reduce travel time along Pleasant Grove Boulevard by 8 minutes in each direction. So riders who are taking this route are going to see significant time savings if they're traveling there and back, 16 minutes per day. So it's a 30% reduction in their travel time on a day-to-day basis. The route will also run every 30 minutes. So that is peak, almost double the amount of service that is currently being offered today, and operate from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So one of the changes that we're also looking at is that Fairway Shopping Center loop. We're looking at potentially extending this route based on public feedback and cost and things like that. But for now, this route is going to be basically providing a direct service to Sutter Health by way of the Galleria and the western edge of the city. Next slide, please. Route 2 will be the only route in the system that will operate every 60 minutes. Why is that? Well, for one, the density for where this route operates is not as significant as some of the other areas. However, we do see potential, especially along that northern section of Blue Oaks, where there's development, there's shopping, there's jobs that are happening, and housing. So when we see that come, this route will be able to be, the frequency could be increased to every 30 minutes. But one of the really nice things about this route is that it's going to serve downtown Roseville directly, as well as the Lewis and Orlando. So it's going to provide folks a direct shot from Lewis and Orlando to downtown Roseville. And if you'd like to go travel to the western side of the city, this route is your option. So northwest, you're going to travel on Route 2 from Lewis and Orlando up. Next slide, please. Route 3 is one of, Route 3 really exemplifies kind of what we try to do. A tight route that operates quickly from point A to point B. We're starting in an area that is developing, so that Freedom Way area, that there are shopping, there's hotels and things like that. Continuing on to the Galleria, continuing down to the public library. So essentially, you will have service from the Galleria to downtown Roseville every 30 minutes from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That is not service that exists today. It is a definite need. This will improve entertainment options and things like that. Now, I do want to talk about weekend service just for a second. Routes 1 and 4 and 5 will operate on Saturdays. Route 3 will not, but we are looking at an option. We had a conversation today about potentially having this as an option to operate on Saturdays as well, which will open up that Galleria to downtown Roseville segment on Saturdays. Next slide, please. Route 4. So we've had lots of conversations about Rapid Link, and I think you know of that service connecting from Lincoln down to the Watt I-80 light rail station by way of the medical centers and the Galleria. This is the local version of Rapid Link, for a lack of a better term. This is also the sister route to Route 2. So this route will operate every 30 minutes. Route 4 will, I wish. Route 4 will operate every 30 minutes from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It's going to serve major transit hubs like Lewis Orlando, the Sierra Gardens Transfer Center. There are apartments and employment centers along Eureka. It's going to traverse up to the Galleria. It's going to be on the outside of Sutter Health, but if something does happen to Rapid Link, this route could go into Sutter as well. This will serve Kaiser Riverside, as will Route 2. This will also serve Kaiser Eureka. Again, every 30 minutes, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. One thing you'll notice on all of these routes is that when we talk about transfer points, the majority of these routes connect to other routes multiple times. So transfers will actually be made much easier for people, especially since routes are coming every 30 minutes. They're meeting at major destinations, and then riders will be able to spread out through the city. Next route, please. So Route 5 is very similar to your current Route S. Now, what we have found is that there's a section of shopping along Fairway. Currently, half of it is served by Roseville, half of it is not. So some of the shopping like Winco and some of the grocery stores that are on Fairway aren't currently served. We designed this route to serve those areas along Fairway. It will also connect to Santucci. We've had lots of conversations with Santucci. They definitely want more service. There's definitely demand for more service. So instead of having, I think it's only 2 or 3 buses per day, this route will serve Santucci from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every 30 minutes. So it's a significant increase in the amount of service. It'll also provide new service along that Fairway corridor all the way to the Galleria. On weekends, this is one of the routes that will operate on Saturdays. It won't go to Santucci, but it'll provide a little loop at the top and then continue to provide that service. So again, there's more weekend service with this route, Route 4, and Route 1. Next slide, please. And this is the last route before we talk about Arrow, Rapid Link, and Commuter. So this is very similar to your current Route R, serving the Pride Industries area down to Lewis Orlando. We have not changed anything dramatically with this route. We're still looking at some potential options to increase service. However, ridership has actually gone down, but it's a critical need, so we have decided not to make any changes. What riders of this route will see is improved transfer points, either at Lewis and Orlando with routes 2, 3, and 4, or along some of the other corridors with Arrow. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about Arrow, because this is going to be probably the single biggest change other than the local route changes. Right now, if you have $3.75, you can use an app called Roseville's Dispatch and take a bus anywhere in the city. And you can do that 7 days a week. It's a fantastic service if you have the money. One of the issues is when you have service that goes all the way through the city, it means there's less responsiveness of those buses. If you don't have enough supply and you have a demand service, that means that you have to wait longer, the trips take longer, there's less of an optimization. So what we've done is separated the entire city into 3 zones. And this was not just we threw darts against the board, we looked at where ridership was, we looked at where people wanted to go, where trip generators are, and we created 3 distinct zones of Arrow service. If you're in those zones, you can board Arrow and you can travel in that zone without any issue. You can also transfer to a fixed route, because that's the other issue we have with Arrow. It cannibalizes the fixed route. Arrow ridership has increased 20% since it was implemented year over year. Fixed route ridership has actually gone down in many cases. So it's like what Uber did to public transit. It's kind of what's happening here, is that the Arrow is cannibalizing the fixed route, but it's only for those that can afford it. So what we want to do is make the fixed routes really, really, really valid ways to get across major thoroughfares. And that's what the zonal system will do. It'll allow transfers to the fixed route system, and it'll also allow transfers within Aero. So if you're in Aero Zone 1, you'll see a little kind of small pink zones there and want to transfer to Zone 2. Those are the areas you can do it. There's a north transfer point and a south transfer point. You can also transfer to the local Route 1. If you're in Zone 2, there's the Galleria, which will serve as a connection point for Zone 3 and Zone 2 together. There's also 4 routes within there. So you will have 4 and 5 different options to transfer in the system, and they'll all happen very quickly because Aero will be much, much more responsive. Next slide, please. This is a summary of the Aero service. I'm not going to go into it too much because I kind of talked through it. It is in your deck. Next slide, please. So let's talk RapidLink. Now, RapidLink has predated us for sure. This is something that was part of a grant application. It is a service designed to go from Lincoln through Roseville to the Watt I-80 station. The routing is something that is essentially, it was decided. We refined it just a little bit to connect the medical centers and go into the light rail station. One of the nice things is it's going to provide service to and from Sacramento every 30 minutes from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. We're looking at those hours. Those are pretty significant. You may get back to one of these locations and not have another bus to come to because Roseville service is not going to run that late. But that RapidLink is funded for the next 3 years in terms of operating costs. Next slide. We have had at our public outreach meetings, I would say probably 50% of the people that are there talk about Sacramento service. And if we compare the last 2 years, the service to Sacramento has not come back fully from where it was pre-pandemic, but it has grown double digits month to month, year over year. More people are calling and complaining about buses being full, and when we say full, that means that there's no longer a seat next to them that you could use to put your bag on. There might be a person sitting next to them. So they're not full. They're just not as empty as they were a few months ago. With that said, we still think that there's a way to redo the commuter services to make them more attractive, make it more convenient for folks that are going back to the office. And with RapidLink, the folks that are working alternative work shifts have a way back into Roseville pretty quickly. So we've designed the services to launch from either Taylor, the Sunsplash Park and Ride, or the Mahaney Park and Ride. Those are the 2 locations that essentially cover the majority of Roseville. Currently, the Mahaney Park and Ride routes traverse all through Roseville. There are stops that the Taylor route makes before it gets to Taylor, goes in. We've reduced that travel time significantly. We're recommending reducing that travel time significantly. Mahaney will take Foothills over to Kirby, down to 80, and serve Sacramento. Taylor will start at Taylor Road, hop right on the freeway, and head right into Sacramento. We've rerouted the routes also. If you've noticed, if you've taken the service, the routes operate currently a different AM route and a different PM route in Sacramento. So sometimes you have to walk over a block. You just have to know where you're going. With obviously the significant help from staff, we rerouted it to be the same route AM and PM. We've also increased 1 additional trip to from the Taylor Road. So right now there's 6. We're proposing 7. There was 10 during the pandemic, so we're not back to where we were pandemic-wise. The hope is we can get there. The route timing has also been made so that if the city would like to add another trip, they can with an existing set of buses. It would just be additional operating costs. Next slide, please. Let me break down these options as quickly as possible. So with the preferred plan, every route will operate every 30 minutes except for Route 2. Service will run from 7 a.m. to approximately 8 p.m. The last trip on every fixed route will start at 7 p.m. Most end, they're either 30 or 35 minutes, so they'll end about 7:30, 7:35. Aero service is currently proposed to operate from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. From 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., it is across the whole service area. From 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., it's across the whole service area. The rest of the time, it's in those zones that we talked about. Saturday service will only be on routes 1, 4, and 5. We're looking at route 3. And Saturday and Sunday service on Arrow will operate till 7. So that is later than it is today. Next slide, please. And I think this is the part where we really want to talk about how we're going to entice folks to use Roseville. So Arrow service, we're proposing reducing it from $3.75 to $1.50. We've done the math on the fare revenue. It is not a significant loss because we're going to see it in increased ridership on the routes. We are also proposing increasing commuter fares from $3.25 to $4. Now, commuter service, I think everyone has known that that price has not gone up in a very long time. Going to $4 accounts for the increase in the new operating costs, and this is not a group of riders who have a lot of elasticity in their fare structure. So we don't expect to see a lot of bounce back, pushback from that. Local service stays the same. But what we tried to do here was really simplify the number of passes, the number of things that you have to decide before you actually board the bus. You either pay the one ride price or you have a monthly pass for fixed route or commuter. You don't have to worry about resident versus non-resident. It's either $1.50 if you're traveling within Roseville, or it's $4 if you're traveling to Sacramento. Rapid Link would be we're still talking about the Rapid Link fare structure. So, but on Roseville Transit Service, it's either $1.50 or it's $4. This is the last slide, but before I talk about that, I want to talk about some of the next steps. So, from a public outreach point of view, we have received well over 1,000 individual responses or talked to people, whether it's the town halls, whether it's the public comments as part of the website that was up, or the surveys, or the flash vote that we've done. Over the last 6 months, there have been 14 different events where people have heard about this plan. We have changed the plan, as you can see today. The plan has changed for those of you who were there in August. The plan has changed since then. We do expect to refine the plan, but only slightly. This is really the plan that we will most likely go forward with in October. While we don't expect to make major changes, we are absolutely open to changes if they make sense for folks. If we've missed something, we've worked closely with PCT, we've worked closely with staff to make sure that this is the plan that we can go forward with. In October, we'll bring this back to you for your approval to council. Council will get it then in December if you do approve it. And we have set forth a implementation plan that's 3 years long. Next month's report is going to be about that thick, so I apologize in advance. We're going to give you a distilled version of it so that it won't be too hard to go through. I know you all have jobs, but the major part of it is what you have seen today. So with that said, I know there's public comment. I'll sit down for that and then be happy to take your questions.
All right. Thank you, sir. Mr. Frost, did you have anything additional for that? No?
Did a
Okay.
great job.
All right. So at this time, I'll open this agenda item up for public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the commission on this item?
Well, I'll start off by talking about the fares. I've got a couple of quibbles with the fares. I don't know, can you put that back up? The non-resident things needs to go away. I mean, come on. $40 extra, somebody from Lincoln or Rockland pays it, was it $1.25 or more, and everybody gets on, has to show that they live whether or not they live in Roseville, takes extra time to get on the bus and everything else. Should be the same for everybody. I mean, and one of the things that several city operators have found is when people are going to work, sometimes it's only three days a week or rather than 5 days. So what they've done is they've dropped their monthly pass by 20%. And so it's enabling people who don't go every day to get a monthly fare. And I think that's a worthwhile suggestion. And the other suggestion in terms of getting ridership, right now, West Rockland has no commuter service at all. if one of the existing commuters or if you add a new one, just go into, like Roseville does, there's a Lund Playground has or Community Park has a bunch of spaces there too. And have all the money go into Roseville, you know, 325, have it all go to Roseville Transit, and it would pay for itself. And I really think that the Arrow should be more expensive than fixed route. You want to encourage people to use fixed route when they can. It doesn't have to be twice as much or something, but it should not be the same price. But anyway, those are minor quibbles. I think this is a very good study. I think he's done a good job. He got rid of all the one-way loops, and the real advantage of doing that is each route. If you have to, you can cut a little bit or add a little bit without changing all the other routes, and that works out very well. I want to hit some specific things. I'm going to, if I can stop the clock for a minute, I'm going to.
I can stop it.
No, it's okay. Thank you, sir.
Share with you.
Oops.
This table is very interesting. It shows for each one of the routes what major generators are served. And an interesting thing about it is there's a lot of routes that serve both the Galleria and at least one of the hospitals. And in fact, there are 4 routes that serve both Galleria and Sutter. And what has happened with both PCT and Roseville is PCTPA told them to ignore the rapid link, assume it doesn't exist. And so you've got more service to the hospitals than you need because the rapid link also goes there. If you look under, if you can follow them, Route 1, Galleria, Sutter. Route 3, Galleria and Sutter. Now, the 2 with asterisks go just on Roseville Parkway. You have to walk up, but that's, and Route 4, Galleria and Sutter. And the rapid link, Galleria and Sutter. You've got too much, when rapid link goes in, you've got too much service, and they're going to cannibalize each other. Okay. It really upsets me just as a citizen that you're cannibalizing routes and you're putting this major $11 million program in, and you're not trying to make it work. You're betting against it. And I really think initially try to make rapid link work and wait a while to put in some of the routes that are going to duplicate service. PCT with Placer County Transit, it's even worse. Route 10 goes to the Galleria and light rail, same as Rapid Link. Rapid Link is going to take 30% of Route 10. Are they going to be reimbursed for that? I mean, it just makes sense for Rapid Link to stop at Louis Orlando. You've got three routes going to Louis Orlando. And they should, and you've got this Rapid Link thing that's a major thing, and it's just going to drive right by Louis Orlando. It makes no sense, fiscally or planning-wise or anything else. Makes no sense. Rapid Link was approved 4 years ago. Since then, there has been no public information available to the public. There's been no budget. There's been no route until this came along. And no schedule. They've changed the route and they've changed the schedule. They haven't notified anybody. And they're saying, just ignore it. You can't ignore it. Anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Eklund.
Okay.
Mr. Kumar, do you have this? Yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, okay, the next 2 things I want to talk about, I've got 2 just route adjustments I'd like to see.
Mr. Eklund, your time has run out.
My 5 minutes ran out already?
5 minutes ran out.
Okay. Okay, anyway.
But trust me, what you've said has been noted, and and we're listening to you. Okay?
Okay.
I appreciate it, sir.
There's a page here showing the 2 things I'd like to see.
We saw it.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, anybody else in the audience that would like to? Yes, ma'am?
Speaking as a senior citizen,
Take your time. Thank you.
and nothing requires an answer to this, but I want to ask, how many people here took the bus today? Took the transit today?
I did.
Got a ride from Arrow? How many people here? You're all the commission. What's going on? I get it. I get it. It is easier for me as a senior citizen who still has a car to drive one driver. I try and take people with me everywhere I go. That's just my idea. But every one of us as human beings, residents of Roseville for a long, long time, when Highway 65 was a 2-lane road. And there's always been a backup at the intersection in Roseville. There's always been a slowdown coming down from Auburn or whatever else. There's more houses, more cars, more people. And all of these billions of houses that are going in with 2, 3, 4 cars, the question is, how are you going to convince yourselves and all of us to take rapid transit? It was a thing growing up. You had no other choices. We didn't have the cars. We lived in a city. But every single one of you need to get to your children's special, to be a good dad, to be a good parent, to anything. Just, it makes no sense to me if you can't find the encouragement for people to take rapid transit or any public transit. You're always going to have these problems with your cars. You're always going to have the same financial issues. Going to run out of money. You're going to get electric cars, and most of us can't afford electric cars. There's not going to be an end to the problem until you yourselves and everyone else decide rapid transit or any public transit is the way to go.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, is there anybody else in the audience that has a public comment for this agenda item?
Oh, yes, for this agenda item.
Correct. See you later.
So I want to comment that I was at the open house in August. I wish I had these other small business cards with me. I could come back to another commission meeting and, as it relates to the Rapid Link, provide you information about a big capital improvement project happening right now at the Watt I-80 station that includes widening the bus lane that would accommodate the capacity for additional service on regional operators like the up-and-coming Rapid Link service. The hope is that project would be concluded in early 2026. But it's going on right now. It will go on throughout next year. So at another meeting, I'll come back to you about that project specifically, because it's more than 1 minute of time. But anyway, on the rest of this presentation, very well thought out, and I think it's going to serve Roseville residents exceptionally well. The one thing, and I go back to what I said, just as transportation advocacy and consulting, that will help the public is that if this plan included service 7 days a week and not 6 days a week. In addition, seeing the hour that we're in and the hours that were shown on the slides, mainly 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., span of service will be also important, not inclusive to the Rapid Link, but for all the other local services. My first thought was maybe this meeting starting at 6 was going to get out, that we could get back on the bus to Lewis and Orlando at 7:40, but now it looks like that will be 8:40, because there was a lot of very important information that needed to come out tonight before we make critical decisions moving forward. So going this additional hour made a lot of sense this evening for what was on the packed agenda. So I hope that one thing that could be taken into consideration is going past 7 p.m. for service, so that if things were needed, like this evening as a good example, that service would be available under the new Roseville Transit Network, as it is like with Route A and B under the current Roseville Transit Network. And people could appreciate that. So just some things to take into consideration, but want to thank the presenter for mentioning no formal or final decisions tonight. Everyone's still gathering information, comment, expertise from residents and transportation professionals, and we'll go back and see, what's to come at the next meeting and get this to council by the close of 2024. And I'll just conclude to say that there's going to be more COAs coming. I was just at one last week called Realign AC Transit, speaking on behalf of Capital Corridor riders on 3 routes. And next Wednesday, but not at 6 p.m., but at 9 a.m. at the Domes up in Auburn at the end of Route 10. There will be a presentation on the final COA for Placer County Transit and Auburn Transit. So that will be presented. And maybe there will be more things just within the next 8 days, because that's 8 days from now, on this plan as well, just as information. So again, thank you everybody for the presentation tonight and for assuring nothing is going to be final or going to council immediately, but that this will come back in more of a final version incorporating everything that's been mentioned. And I will conclude to say, take a look at Route 2, if you could also, and consider if it can go to a 30-minute frequency, since it was one that did touch upon serving the Civic Center and going down to Lewis, Orlando via Vernon and Riverside. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, is there anybody else in the audience that would like to address the commission on this agenda item? Yes, ma'am.
If somebody can bring up the slide with Route 3 on it, if that's possible.
Is it possible to get Route 3, the slide, up on the screen?
Memory.
We have it in front of us if you're trying to, there you go.
Did you need it on the screen, ma'am? Or do you want us to look at it?
No.
Yeah.
There we
okay.
go. That'll work. Thank you.
So I'm trying to do this from what I remember. So up until this very date, I've used the M route to connect to the A or B bus to go down to Kaiser Riverside. And I've trained my elderly mother to do that, although she doesn't feel comfortable doing it alone. If the changes are made with the upcoming route structure, and you can correct me, right now, where we live, the timing, it takes me about 45 minutes to make that route on M and B right now, down to Kaiser Riverside, without the use of dial-a-ride. So if I was to do this now, because you're taking the current B route out of play, it's going to take me longer. So, because she's going to have to go all the way around. So that's something to think about. So it's not really going to be a faster system. It's going to take longer. Because as I stated on my online comments, I have had quite difficulty on the use of the Placer Go app. Myself, who is very tech savvy, scheduling, whether it's 1, 2, 8, 10, 12 days out, getting a ride on the Placer Go app, every single time I go on to schedule, there are no rides available. I can count on one hand the amount of times I am able to get a ride scheduled on the app. I have to put down the app on my Apple iPhone and call the call center and get the lovely people in the call center to book a ride for me. And multiple times do they have to tell me, we have to hand this over to dispatch to schedule you. A ride that I have scheduled on Thursday to go to my daughter's feeding therapy appointment, I have to go an hour and 45 minutes ahead of the appointment. If you put this Route 3 in play and it has no Saturday service, my mother, who goes frequently on the M route to Winco, will not be able to do her grocery shopping on Saturday if it does not run on Saturday. She frequently gets up at 7 a.m. in the morning and goes grocery shopping at 8 a.m. These are things you need to think about. You don't bother with this because, as Jane said, you have a car. It's also going to take my mother 2 buses to go shopping. If that second bus isn't there, she's going to get stranded at the Galleria. You have now made seniors' life very difficult. I think you need to go back to the drawing board. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anybody else in the audience that has any public comment for this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment. And commissioners, do you have any questions for staff? We'll start at this end. Nothing. Mr. Radford?
Thank you, Mr. Kumar, and Innovate Mobility. Good report. Thank you.
Mr. Bell?
Yeah, just one. Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Are there any planned time transfers between lines, pulse scheduling, so you're hitting at the same time? Like, how does that plan to work out?
Yeah, that's a great point. So one of the reasons why a lot of these routes either start or end at the Galleria or go through the Galleria is we're using the Galleria as a pulse point. So routes will be timed. We actually had a conversation just today about top of the hour, bottom of the hour, when these routes are coming in. The nice thing is they're going to be running every 30 minutes as opposed to 60 or more. So time transfers are actually going to be a bit easier. There are also going to be, so as we have north and southbound routes that are connecting, making sure that those routes are connecting on the same side of the street. So as a far side stop, near side stop, timing the location and additionally the time will be important. And I do just want to mention a couple of things. So the service will operate 7 days a week, and it's actually going to be operating later. And the service to Kaiser Riverside, in fact, Route 1 transferring to Route 2 and heading down on Route 2 will be only a 27-minute trip versus 45 today. So it's a pretty significant saving. Now, there is that service onto Fairway, which is what I talked about in the initial presentation. That's something that we will look at. It would require duplication of service along Fairway to do it, and there'd be a stretch of area where there isn't any place to stop. So that's something we'll look at, though.
Thank you very much. I think the 30-minute headway increase is probably really important, so great job.
Thank you.
Mr. McGeorge?
Thanks again for your presentation. I was at the meeting in August, and although it being hot and your computer was not being your friend that day, it was very informational, and I got to learn a lot of this stuff a little earlier than we are today. So I'm glad we get to see it all again. As for that question mark, was it 2 that's not going to run through this area on Saturdays, or was it 3?
It would be 3 that wouldn't operate on Saturdays. Right now, we'll have 1, 4, and 5 operating on Saturdays. There'll be more service.
Yeah.
But Route 3 currently won't. But we're talking about a way to do it that will be pretty cost affordable.
Yeah. As someone who, works down here and lives in the area, and with all of just the stuff that happens on the square right behind us.
Absolutely.
I think that would be something we might want to look at, especially for stuff that happens on the weekends, to bring people out here that don't normally come this direction.
Yeah.
There's an amazing brewery, there's some restaurants, there's a music venue here as well that, would really like to be showed a little love in that aspect. But other than that, I'm excited to read the novel in front of us for next month, and thanks for your presentation.
We'll get it to you early.
Thank you.
Ms. Festerson?
I have no questions. Great presentation. Thank you. It was nice seeing you again. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your presentation. No questions.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciated the presentation. in past meetings, I've always kind of stated that I think that the key to more usership for public transit, not just for Roseville, but for anywhere in today's modern age, is to make it more efficient. Because I think that most people in the world are, like the elderly lady that already left said, that everybody's in a hurry to get somewhere nowadays, right? So the quicker you can use public transit, I think the more palatable it is for people like myself that would just jump into a car because it's more efficient and faster. So it's good to see that the report you're creating is generally providing a faster service, right? And I think that's pretty cool. I did have a couple of questions that kind of popped into my head. You were talking about the Aero service and how there's the different zones, and you would have to go to an area to travel to another zone. Would that be like, I guess, ultimately something that would be seamless in the app, where if I would book one ride, say I live in West Roseville, say if I wanted to go down to downtown Roseville, that's in the next zone over. Would I book one ride and it would figure it all out to where I would have to pick up one car, transfer a car, I guess, all in the app together?
So I actually spoke with your technology provider today, and we talked about what are some of the innovations they're putting in. One is something called multimodal, and that will allow you to do all your trip planning in one step. Now, in terms of how the transfers will work, this is one of a couple of the complaints that we've heard tonight is that there's not enough buses, there's no rides available. That's because the buses are traversing the entire length of the city. So with the zones, what you would do, or what anyone in a zone, if you're traveling within the zone, you can use Aero without any issue. What we want to do is promote Aero to a fixed route if you're traversing through multiple zones. We don't want it to be that, oh, Aero is more expensive, but I can take it, so I'm going to use that instead of the fixed route. So yes, it would automatically schedule with the technology that that Roseville is putting in on their regular buses, automatically schedule the time frame for both your trips to and back.
Gotcha. And then I guess, I get minor detail, but say I was wanting to take my trip from West Roseville to downtown, and it looks like that the proposed cost for Aero is now the same as the bus, $1.50. If I wanted to do that route, would I get charged $1.50 for the route all the way from point A to point B, or would it be $1.50 for my Aero portion and $1.50 for my transit portion?
Yeah. So today, you pay every time you board. One of the things we've talked about is a day pass. So you'd pay, could be $3, $4, and you could ride all day for that $4 payment. The other thing we've put into our preferred plan that we're modeling right now is something called fare capping. So this idea is that you pay until you reach a certain point. And that is a number that the city can set, whether it be $4 or whatever it is, but ideally you just pay until you've reached that limit. The issue that we have is that fare increases are extremely regressive. So with monthly passes and the discounting of monthly passes, it is actually negatively affecting low-income folks. So what we want to do is implement a fare capping or a day pass technology, or actually day pass doesn't really require any technology, that you do pay every time you board. So you'd pay from Aero to local and back, but only up to a certain amount, or you'd buy a day pass on the bus and you'd be able to traverse the entire system for that day for one price.
Gotcha. So kind of in the works, figuring out what the options are there.
Yep.
But I mean, even at the end of the day, if I paid $1.50 for the Aero and then $1.50 for my transit, that's probably a $25 Uber ride today with the options that I have right now. So
yeah, we don't want you to pay $6 though for a round trip. So that's just not affordable. So, but to your point, it is $50 round trip on Uber, and it is a great brewery.
And then I guess
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Go ahead.
If I could just add, so not only are we looking at doing a fare cap on a daily basis, but a weekly basis and a monthly basis. So let's just say that we have a passenger that rides every day. They might hit their fare cap 15 days into the month. So the rest of the month, they could potentially ride the service for free, so to speak. I mean, in other words, they've ridden the surface so much that they now cap out. So it's fairly prevalent within some of the different programs that are happening within transit agencies throughout the nation. And so it's, like I said, there's some nuances we need to certainly work out, but it's like I said, I just kind of want to emphasize that it's not only just the daily, but it's we're looking at the weekly and the monthly and seeing what's going to be financially feasible.
Absolutely. I think there's probably going to be a lot of nuances that need to be worked out over the coming months for you guys with this whole new system coming. So that's a good thing, though, right? Optimizing everything. So I just have two more things. You brought up the fact that you're working on this technology to encourage you to go, if you wanted to go from zone 1 to zone 2 to zone 3, it would like find you a bus at some point. Would the app estimate, and then obviously just an estimation, but would it still do a semi-accurate job of estimating your time of arrival to where you're going? If I had to say, take the arrow and then get on the route, whatever, 3 that take me to my ultimate destination.
Right. So I can't say for certain what Spare, the technology provider in Roseville, will agree on. Conversation that I'm having with Spare on another project and that I'm imploring them to put here will do exactly that. So it requires something called GTFS RT. So GTFS real time is essentially the protocol that allows buses to show up on Google. So you know where the buses are on Google. Does it show the bus? Shows the timing. So yes, as long as that GTFS RT feed is created and Rich and Ed have worked on the technology on the bus to create that feed, absolutely do that. It'll also tell you walking distance and it'll also give you choices. So if you're close to a fixed route and it's say a 12-minute wait to board Arrow, and a 7-minute walk to fixed route, it'll say, here, you can save 5 minutes by walking a fixed route, and it'll take you to your destination. And for those who are paratransit eligible, it'll give them multiple options.
And I guess the last thing I had is just more of a general comment. There's been a couple of comments by people that a lot of the people that take the bus are more senior aged, not as technologically capable as other people. I would just hope that the city has a plan, and I'm sure you do, a plan in place, and I'd love to see what it is in the future of how we educate the riders to this whole new system. Because I can imagine that if I was a person that lived in Eschaton Village and you changed everything on me come whenever that day is, that's going to be a heck of a shell shock for some people. So I'm excited to see how we implement all this new information in the coming months. And I think I've said enough.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, Commissioners, any more questions or comments or anything for staff on this agenda item? No?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Very well done. All right, so at this time, Commissioners, do you have any informational items to report? I have one. We have 2 commissioners that it is their last commission meeting. Tavi, you're leaving us, so thank you very much for your service. I hope it was a really good experience. And Commissioner Vesterson, after all these years. And so thank you so much for what you did for the city of Roseville, for all your different venues of volunteer and everything that you've done for us.
Right. It's been a lot of fun. I think the first thing I ever did with the city of Roseville after I opened my business was I was at Kiwanis, and Bike Rodeo came to town, and there was a presentation from the city about Bike Fest is what it evolved to. And I learned really early on that the best thing a business person can do in the city of Roseville is to partner up with the city, and it's just a win-win situation. But yes, I've 8 years on grants and 4 years here, and it's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Well, we thank you so much for your service to the city. With that, we will entertain the adjournment. Is there anybody who would like to make a motion and a second to approve, or
I'd
to
like
make a motion for adjournment?
to do that. I would like to close this meeting in honor of a really good friend of mine that passed, Aldo Panesci, and I'd like to close the meeting on that, and if I could get a second.
Second. Mr. Radford, second. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.